Well, hey everybody. I hope you're having a great day. So I've got a really special guest. It's somebody that I met, I don't know, a while ago now. Who his name is Rich Logis. He started a group called Leaving MAGA, which the name in and of itself says what it does, and it kind of tells a little bit about his background. But what I think is important, I get asked all the time, Rich, from people, what's it going to take to break the spell? What is it about MAGA that has attracted people so much to it? And I thought that, I could always give people the answers that I have, but there's nobody better to talk to about it than you. So let's start with, first off, why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of how you got into MAGA, how you got out of it, and a little about the organization. We'll just go from there.
Sure. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate having me. Good to see you. And I want to mention for everyone who's watching, I'd like to apologize to you for so many of the statements that I made about you publicly and privately. When I was in MAGA, I should say, not we, because you weren't, but when I was in MAGA, we viewed Trump supporting Republicans and conservatives in a different kind of way as Democrats. We reserved a particular ire for Republicans and conservatives who did not support our movement. And in 2015, I felt very politically lonely. And Trump, as an outsider, is someone who provided what became eventually this MAGA community. And it was a place where people found camaraderie, where people found belonging. And the devotion to Trump is really, it really stems from the fact that he's the leader of this community. So I wasn't just a partisan Trump voter. I worked in the campaign. I did grassroots work after the 2016 election. I became a pundit and a podcaster. I had bylines in places like Fox and the Federalist and WorldNet Daily, really far right-wing media, which I also consumed. And so I spoke at Trump groups. I was a sponsor of Trump groups. MAGA was my complete identity. My entire being and personhood was wrapped up in this community and this movement. And there were lots of factors that eventually led to my leaving. To paraphrase the late Ernest Hemingway, my road to Damascus moment where the scales fell from the eyes, it happened gradually and then suddenly all at once. I knew the president at the time was mismanaging COVID. I did not believe that the election was stolen. I did not support January 6th. So those were some of the reasons, Adam, that eventually led to my leaving. One of the accelerants for me was actually not Donald Trump. It was my governor, Ron DeSantis, who in the summer of 21, he started platforming anti-COVID vaxxers at his press conferences. People who were saying the vaccine was deadlier than the virus. And if we remember, in that period of time in the summer of 21, the Delta surge was ravaging the country, including kids getting sick and dying. So it really shocked me why Ron DeSantis was doing that, and it caught me completely off guard. And after that moment, I did something that sounds very simple, but was profoundly life-altering and changing for me, is I diversified my news and information sources. And after I did that, slowly I started to question a lot of the sincerely held beliefs I had, ranging from Democrats were coming for our guns to public schools were indoctrinating children into transgender Marxism to liberals and progressives trying to import brown people to replace white people. These were the kinds of beliefs that I held when I was in MAGA. And so after I diversified, I started to open my aperture of media, and instead of consuming solely right-wing media, I started to bring in other sources. And there were some other reasons that led to my eventual leaving. If you recall very vividly, I'm sure, back in February of 22, the Republican Party called the insurrection legitimate political discourse. And then for me, the final straw, even though Trump wasn't president, I knew exactly what his and MAGA's response would be. The final straw for me was Uvalde, Texas school shooting on May 24th, 2022. And it was shortly thereafter where I quietly left MAGA. But something was really gnawing at me at the time, because I was always so unapologetically public in my support for Trump. I felt that I needed to reciprocate that, and I needed to be public in my renunciation of MAGA. And it was on August 30th 2022. It's the exact day I remember. I wrote a mea culpa, and in that apology, I said that I was sorry that I had erred and that I wanted to apologize to anyone whom I may have hurt with my deeds and my rhetoric. And so I call that day of August 30th, 22, my Leaving MAGAversary. So I got another one coming up. And the fact is, Adam, I actually never believed that anybody would care.
Mm-hmm.
I did it just because I needed to close that chapter of my life, but I discovered that there were friends and family all across the country whose relationships had been torn asunder by this movement, and I was very naive and oblivious to that. So I spent the next year just telling my story to those who wanted to hear it, and it was in early 2024 when I founded Leaving MAGA. And because MAGA, I believe, is a community, we founded our organization to develop a new community for people who leave MAGA, for people who are having doubts, and also for friends and family, because if people are going to eventually leave MAGA, they're going to turn to their close ones. And I want our allies out there, I want to really implore them to not give up on their friends and family who are in MAGA, because I and the other testimonials at our site, which people can find at leavingmaga.org, we're living proof that it's possible to leave. And I'm wagering a bet that as we see what's going on in the country, there are going to be more and more Trump voters, and in particular MAGA supporters, who are going to start to question their support. I think, what's it going to take, Adam? I think it's an individual question for each person. It's going to be one unnecessary death too many. It's going to be another lie too many. It's going to be another defiance of a court order too many. It will be another illegal deportation too many. And I think that right now there are many who are quietly doubting. So we want our organization to be a place where they can come, feel welcome, without judgment, without ostracization.
Yeah, look, it's, you mentioned the slowly and then all at once as how you kind of came to the realization. And I think that's got to be what happens in the movement. And, Reed Galen recently wrote an article about Pam Hemphill, who you know. Pam was an insurrectionist. She was there on January 6th. I think they called her like MAGA grandma or something like that. And, she paid her penalty. And then, like you, basically saw the light, spent her time. She was campaigning for Kamala, like you were, spent her time, in essence, saying, I was wrong. This is what I did. And in fact, proactively rejected the pardon that she got from Donald Trump for her, insurrection activity. So she's still, as far as I know, a convicted felon because she rejected that pardon. Well, the Idaho Democratic Party basically rejected her speaking at the 50501 rally because, as a letter that I saw from the chairman out there, not the state, but one of the counties, she said, people just aren't as forgiving as some of us. Now, what's your response to that? This may end up taking longer than the 15 minutes I had planned because I have a lot of questions for you. But how does it make you feel when you see some people say things like, well, there's never any forgiveness for people that were part of MAGA. We can never accept them. And not just from the perspective of how are we ever going to win an election again with that attitude, but just talk about from your experience on people that have done that to you, as well as people that have been forgiving and accepting. What's that kind of been like?
Sure. And, I want to direct everyone again to our testimonials at our site, because there's...
And please, let me just say, too, as you're listening to this, go to that site, leavingmaga.org, take a look at it. And if you're so inclined, financially support. He's doing, the money is being spent very wisely, but it's in reaching out to some of these people that need community. So go ahead.
Thank you, Adam. And we are a nonprofit as well. I founded us as such. And, I would like to also direct viewers to our testimonials, because there's another gentleman who actually rejected the pardon, and he hasn't received as much. He's received some press coverage. His name is Jason Riddle, and he served jail time as well, went into the Capitol, and he rejected the pardon, and we featured him at our site.
Put me in touch with him, by the way. I'd like to call him at some point.
Yeah, I absolutely will. He'd be happy to speak with you. Good man, suffered from alcoholism, turned his life around, and he's rejected that pardon because, as he tells it much more eloquently than I do, he came to realize the fake patriot narrative that existed around, and still does, around January 6th. I think with the purity test that exists, I think that if there's a purity test on the Democratic Party side, then it's going to turn away a lot of good people whom we need as more allies. And I've encountered it as well, where people who are anti-MAGA, are happy that we tell our stories, but they want us to go away. And on one hand, Adam, I understand there's a lot of trauma that exists both amongst MAGA supporters. It's a lot of economic trauma. It's a lot of feelings of being unseen and unheard, maybe spoken down to, punched down, as the saying is. And there's a lot of trauma amongst those who have opposed Trump, especially those who opposed him from the very outset when he first ran. So I understand those sentiments of the anger and those feelings that maybe are rageful or borderline rageful. But I would ask people to think about that others can change their mind. And I think that if people genuinely seek penitence and show that they are willing to take accountability and make changes, that it is better for us to show grace than not.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can instill culturally amongst the anti-MAGA side that we can afford grace to others, it's going to make it more likely for people who want to leave or have doubts to come forward. We're talking right now in Leaving MAGA, we're talking to, for example, a veteran who is having some doubts, and he may or may not eventually tell his story, but I know that there are others out there, because they've come to us, who are feeling these doubts about their support for Trump, because they're looking around the country and saying, this is not really what I voted for. And for those who are anti-MAGA, there's this question of, well, how did you not know? And,
right.
How could you? And the answer for that, it sounds so simplistic, but it's accurate, is that a lot of the ones saying, I didn't realize what was going to happen, it's because the media they consume did not at all tell them that. And I know this because I lived in the MAGA media bubble for more than half a decade. And it was when I started to move outside of that comfort zone, when I started to hear more accurate information, and it eventually led to my leaving.
Let me ask you a question. So, you say, we're talking to a veteran about leaving. You've talked to other people, and I'm sure there's people watching like, well, if you want to just leave MAGA, you just leave. And the reality is, and, with what I experienced by being, in essence, excommunicated from the party, which I laugh because I'm like, I was probably a bigger enemy to you guys than even the Democrats were, because I was like not on board.
You were. Yeah, you were. It's true.
So they're like, well, why don't you just leave? And I think you touched at the very beginning about how this is a community and we get our identity. I mean, look, a lot of people that are watching this may be Democrats. And here's the interesting thing. When you introduce yourself to people, how long does it take for you to tell them you're a Democrat? I get people all the time, Rich, that come up to me and say, there's nothing wrong with this, but they come up and they say, I'm a Democrat, but I appreciate what you're doing. And I appreciate them saying that. But the point is, why do you feel the need to lead? I'm a Democrat.
Right.
Well, the reality is because all of us almost now find our identity in our politics.
Yes.
And when you come at this from a position of feeling politically homeless and isolated, rejected by the coasts, right? Economic hardship, cultural hardship, whatever that is, you join a community. So why don't you talk a little about why it is that leaving is a process and some of the costs, so people are aware that it's not just going, oh, I'm just not MAGA anymore. It's a process here.
It is, and I differentiate.
It's almost like deprogramming from a cult, really. I mean, it's like coming to see the world a different way. I don't love to call it that, but it's like having to see the world differently all of a sudden with like brighter shades, I guess.
I can talk from my personal experience, two primary reasons why it was so hard to leave. Number one is because of the community and the sense of belonging. I had a second family. My MAGA community, I spoke to them every single day, Adam. There was not a day that went by for years that we weren't in some kind of communication. And when I decided to leave, I knew I was going to leave behind that second family.
Mm-hmm.
And that second family, my MAGA my fellow MAGA brothers and sisters at the time, they took precedence oftentimes over my own blood family. As embarrassed as I am to admit that, so MAGA, and I take accountability for this. I'm responsible because everyone has agency, but I allowed MAGA to result in neglecting familial duties as a parent and as a husband. And then the other reason it's so difficult to leave is because someone is so invested in that community, and I'm not just talking financially, I'm talking emotionally, spiritually, personally, politically. I had to painfully but liberatingly conclude that so much of what I believed was wrong.
Hmm.
And it wasn't, Adam, one or two beliefs where you say, oh, okay, there's a belief on XYZ issue, I was wrong. It was an accumulation of years and years of beliefs. And it's not realistic to ask someone who is finding their community and their sense of belonging to just pick up and leave. That's different from partisan Trump voters. Partisan Trump voters are not MAGA people. They don't go to rally. It's not their identity. It doesn't consume them. They might associate as a Trump voter or a Republican, but they're not deep into the community like I and millions of others are. But the ones who are MAGA, it is so difficult to leave because the mythologies of MAGA and the information silo, it always creates this gravitational pull to just remain in MAGA. Even when I wrote my mea culpa, there was a moment before I published it where I once again, and the last time I asked myself, is this really what I want to do?
Mm-hmm.
So it was exhilarating, but it was also scary because I knew once I did it, it was permanent. So we're asking people to make a permanent change from something that it's all they've known for years and years and years. For some people, maybe a decade. Not so easy to just stand up and leave, but Leaving MAGA as an organization, even though I will not say that we make it easy, we do try to make it easier for people to give testament to their own stories of how they left.
Yeah, that's nice. So why don't you talk if there's and there will be some, kind of MAGAs watching this or Trump supporters watching this and, probably getting angry or maybe feeling that kind of whisper in their heart that's always kind of been there, but they've stuffed it down, which is like, this isn't right. Um, why don't you talk a little about kind of what your advice would be for those people, or for anybody watching that maybe has a family member that's deep in the MAGA? Because I guarantee you, I mean, I've experienced this. I had half my family send me a letter disowning me because I wasn't sufficiently loyal to Trump, and I was a conservative Republican, for God's sake. And um, so what would your advice be to somebody that's in there now, maybe has that twinge of doubt? And then talk about what is the journey of getting out. Like, you're on the other side of it now. I assume you're happier, you're lighter, you're freer, but that's not automatic and that's not right away. I can tell you that, my time from January 6th to today, there was a lot of damage, a lot of trauma that happened to me in that process that I am still working through. So why don't you just kind of run with some of those questions?
Sure. And for those who are friends and family who are watching right now, we actually wrote it's a very brief blueprint and guide. We call it Reaching Out. And what it is a bunch of don'ts and do's on how to rejuvenate relationships with your friends and family in MAGA. And to show that they are working, there's a lady who's given a testimonial with us, which people can find at our site. Her name is Stefania. She utilized these don'ts and do's for months, and it resulted in her brother in MAGA leaving. And we're just waiting for him to tell his story. So we've had relatives who have left after utilizing this guide. We call it Reaching Out, and people can find it at our site. And for those who are watching this who might be in MAGA, I want to say first off that I disagree with a lot of the rhetoric about Trump voters. I don't think that you're racist and xenophobic and homophobic and misogynistic. And if any of you are having doubts right now, I want you to know, as someone who went through the journey and came out of it, that it doesn't make you a bad person to listen to those doubts and to listen to your conscience. Having doubts doesn't mean that you lack intelligence or you lack good character. It means that there's something in you that is seeking more knowledge, is seeking more information. And if you're having those doubts, it's okay to expand your information sources. And it's also okay to reach out to us to talk through some of the doubts that you're having, because I believe, Adam, that many in MAGA are, if they're not already having doubts, they're going to start to feel some confusion. They're going to start to question their belief system, because how could so many not, with what's going on in the country right now?
Right.
You know, and the reports are plentiful. Every single day we see them about, you know, this farmer voted for Trump, didn't expect his business would be harmed, or this person was a federal worker, didn't think that she'd get laid off. So for those of you in MAGA who are watching this, we are not hostile to you. We are welcoming, we are friendly, we are a place you can come to and have conversations, not to change your mind, not to hammer you over the head with facts and with policy, but to have conversations from one human being to another. When I left MAGA, Adam, I still refer to myself as a born again human being. I stopped dehumanizing people. I did that all the time. Anyone who was not with us, they were against us. And if you were 99.99% with us, you were 0% with us. You needed to be all in. You know, whether it was yourself or it was a Democrat or a liberal or progressive, you had to be 100% with us. So I want those in MAGA to know that if you're watching this, that we are a friendly ear for them.
That's excellent. Well, listen, I've kept you longer than I promised. One of the things I want to say to anybody watching is I'd like to have Rich back. And so leave in the comments any questions you may have for him. You know, whether it's I've got a sister that XYZ or, you know, whatever it is. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. We'll take a gander at them. And I'd like to have Rich back to maybe address some of them. We can kind of do a version of an Ask Me Anything with you, because I think what you're doing is so important, because I even have a tendency to let that kind of damage that, you know, I feel allow me to be angry sometimes. And I need to remember, and we all need to remember that these are fellow human beings. Every person in MAGA thinks that they're doing the best thing for their country, just like we think we're doing the best thing for the country. I always say the Viet Cong think they were fighting for the right cause. Our GIs thought they were fighting for the right cause. Even German soldiers, until the end of the war, thought they were fighting for the right cause. But one of the things that's amazing about that is at the end of World War II, Germany and the United States, as we put Nazism behind us, but Germany and the United States were best friends, because we were able to, in essence, have that forgiveness and recognize that going forward into the future is more important. So again, it's leavingmaga.org. Is there anything you want to say kind of in wrapping up here?
Yeah, and you know what you just mentioned there is a key part of our work also, which is reconciliation.
Mm-hmm.
And the American people are a very forgiving people, and I would implore others, please do not give up on your friends and family. The good people they were before Trump and MAGA, I believe that they remain good people, and I believe, and this is another comment for those in MAGA, I believe that our normal fears and concerns have been manipulated and exploited, and we have been lied to for personal and political gain, and that it's okay if we say we were lied to and we believe lies, because the belief in those lies does not need to remain indefinite and permanent.
That's right. That's right. Well, again, it's leavingmaga.org. Plenty of resources on there. Go on, check it out, reach out. And if you can, support them financially. They're doing great work. And so, again, Rich Logis, thanks for being on. And I look forward to having you back.
Anytime. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it.
You bet.